Welcome to Growing Ecommerce. I'm your host, Mike Ryan of Smarter Ecommerce. Today, I'm joined by Mike Taylor, making his second appearance on the show. He's the co-founder of Vex Power and author of the upcoming book, Marketing Memetics. So last time we talked about testing, marketing mix modeling, and generative AI like DALL-E 2 and GPT-3. And you should check out that episode if you missed it, but it's not required listening. This time, today, we're picking up generative AI again, and we are digging in. We talk about the prospect for marketers in an age of AI, our own work experiences with this tech. Mike is using ChatGPT 100 times a day, he says, and an interesting field called prompt engineering. Then we move on to discuss the so-called war of the search engines between the new Bing experience powered by ChatGPT and Google's Bard. All right, let's get into it. So, Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, welcome back. Would you get us started with a quick intro for people who didn't meet you last time? What are your skills? What themes interest you? And what's new since last time for the people who have listened before?
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Mike Taylor. I never know how to introduce myself in terms of a job title because I'm basically just working on lots of random things I find interesting. But like most interesting, I guess, in terms of if you're deciding whether to listen to me, is I used to run an agency called Ladder. Co-founded it and grew it to 50 people. And then since then, I've just had license to mess around. So last time we were talking a lot about marketing attribution, one of my passions. But this time actually, I wanted to talk more about AI, and that's something I've been messing around with for a while. Actually, when I left Ladder, I toyed with the idea of creating an AI company, and I thought that it wasn't there yet. I thought the technology was going to be like 10 years away, and and I was a fool because I could have been pretty early on in the stuff. But not that I have the intelligence to really build any of these algorithms, but yeah, that's the main thing preoccupying me at the minute. I'm working on a book that's due to come out in the next month. It's not specifically about AI, but ChatGPT, Stable Diffusion, like DALL-E, they all came out while I was writing the book, and they've suddenly kind of had huge implications for like what I'm writing. So it's kind of a fortuitous trend that's picked up.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny that you mentioned that you thought you were like 10 years too early or something.
Yeah.
I think I've got something in mind where we can come back to that in a bit maybe. But yeah, I definitely, my impression is that you've been pretty early on this whole theme compared to other people. I was already learning about, Stable Diffusion and Midjourney and GPT. At an early stage from following you and seeing what you're up to. So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on to talk about this, because of course the theme is just explosive now.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it's like 100 million users or something for ChatGPT.
Yeah. And let's start. So because we did have a question, we had a quick chat about AI last time and generative AI in particular. So let's revisit that and kick it off with that. Like last time I had asked you the question, let's talk about DALL-E, chat or GPT-3. This was, by the way, in October. So that was a couple of months before ChatGPT had its public debut. So my question back then was, for marketers, is this the foot of a mountain or the edge of a cliff? And I'm still not sure, so I'll ask you again.
Good question. No, I mean, I'm trying to think. I want to be consistent with what I said last time, but I mean,
consistency bias, no need.
No. I mean, I'm generally like a techno optimist, right? So, I mean, I've already seen it. Like, ChatGPT is doing a significant amount of my, what I would previously call my work, already, right? And actually, I code as well. So like one of the things I do is like mess around, like building Vex Power and a few other projects. But Copilot is writing 40% of my code. When I write a blog post, I actually don't really use ChatGPT to finish the blog post. Like I think a lot of people get it backwards.
Mhm.
They see it as like this is my slave that I can use to do the final edit. And actually, it's you need to think about it more like a partner. It's a thinking tool. You can bounce ideas back and forth. And I find it most useful in just getting the table of contents
Yeah.
correct, right, and like making sure it's comprehensive. So I'm using it. Like hundreds of times a day to do the various different things that I'm doing. And it's like one of the reasons why, I can keep, having these myriad interests and, still have time despite having two young kids.
Yeah, yeah, and by the way, speaking of 2 young kids, I saw you tweeting the other day about, like, a Paw Patrol bedtime story or something that you
Yeah.
thought so the
Yeah, I'm using ChatGPT. Actually, I used it again today. My daughter, she doesn't she gets car sick, so she doesn't watch like an iPad or anything like that in the car. And we do a lot of long journeys, like down to London, or like my wife's parents live about an hour away. So we have to entertain her, and we have to come up with these stories, and she never wants the same story twice. So we've actually been using ChatGPT and just asking it like, can you give me a Paw Patrol children's story? And we ask her like to give some details that we put into the story. So
Mhm.
today it was like they had to go to the supermarket and do the shopping to cook a special dinner for their mom, right? Like it's like that's and then it's amazing. Like it knows that they live in Adventure Bay, right? Like and it gets all the characters right, and like actually more interesting than that, it assigns them like relevant tasks. So
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
I always forget the name, but like there's one of them that in the show is like always in like construction areas and stuff. Like and in a notice like I kind of picked up, they assigned like a construction type task to that
Yeah.
pup. So it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably learned, like, the fan wiki. I'm sure there's a wiki out there for Paw Patrol, and
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Um, but so just to recap there, so we're talking about this idea, edge of a cliff or foot of a mountain, and so, it sounds like right now you're collaborating a lot with generative AI, and
Yeah.
so it is kind of replacing work that you do, but rather than you just sitting around bored and unemployed, it's actually enhancing your productivity, which is very cool. Like for me, I I have I get the feeling that you're collaborating heavily with it, and I haven't really found that sweet spot personally.
Mm,
Um, I think, like, one of the areas where I've personally been most effective at collaborating with AI or, yeah, machine, let's say, um, is in, like, translation, for example, because,
yeah, great.
I have
You
to
'cause you live in Austria, right?
yeah, exactly. So I have to communicate in German a lot, and I can, I'm fluent in German, but with writing, there's this expectation. It's not about fluency so much as accuracy, and the grammar is awful. So
Yeah. Well,
like,
Germans are very accurate with the grammar as well, right? Like there's like a specific word for everything, right?
yeah, I mean, luckily the Austrians are sloppy with their grammar, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but
Yeah.
it's true. There is a specific word for everything. But I'll just, kind of fluently type in what I want, to translate, and then it gives me a grammatically correct version, and then I know the wording, like, okay, that could be worded differently or better, but I don't have to care about all of these, like, super fine points of the grammar. So, I feel like
Yeah.
that's it shows to me that it's possible, but I haven't gotten there yet with, like, ChatGPT, for example.
Yeah, I think you're using it the right way there. It's you kind of have to treat it like a very eager grad student that
Mhm.
doesn't quite have the experience to know when they're wrong,
Yeah.
but like they're very very keen to give you an answer, right? And
Mhm.
that usually is fine. It's usually good enough to kind of prompt your thinking. I find in general it's much easier for us to tell when something is wrong than to stare at a blank page and put something down. And I kind of think that like ChatGPT and GPT-3, they're very very good at filling that blank page and promoting, kind of prompting that response from you. Actually, like we're prompting the AI, but
Mhm.
really a lot of this is about how the AI is prompting you
Yeah.
to kind of elevate your work, and you can kind of at least get to good enough with the AI, and then you can kind of add in your flourish on the top to make it uniquely human.
Yeah, so, like, earlier you're saying not to this should not be polishing your work, it's not really it should be moving you from 0 to 1, and then you can move the rest of the way there. But
exactly, and like, out of all the work you do, I would say you care a lot about the quality of maybe like 2% of the work, and like 10% of the work needs to be like pretty good, and then like a lot of your work, like a surprising amount of your work, you really don't care that much about. Like I'll put it like, I kind of put this as like a in coding terms. Like there is some, like when you're building a website, like 80-90% of the work is just like boilerplate, essentially.
yeah,
Right? And I think that's what Copilot is kind of doing for me. Like I'm not a very good coder. I'm pretty amateur, and I always forget like, oh, how do we do like a function, like a functional component in React, right? Like, and I forget it. So but like now I can just start typing like, I'm going to make a functional component in React in the comments, and then it starts like filling it, auto completing it for me. So I think like that's kind of the way you got to think about it, is like removing the boilerplate really frees you up to do the more interesting, like more uniquely you type work.
yeah, definitely. I can see that use case for myself with like, even in Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets, just rather than having to think through the logic a lot, or step into a few websites and kind of synthesize, how can I take this bit that works and that bit that works. You can just describe in plain language and
Yeah.
get a result. But
Yeah.
a couple of quotes that I want to contextualize this AI topic, because there's that idea of AI coming to take our jobs. So
Yeah.
that's the idea of us being on the edge of a cliff or something.
Yeah.
And sorry if these are too like LinkedIn wisdom-y or something like that, but I do like both these quotes, but they're at the risk of being kind of LinkedIn wisdom.
Yeah, you can imagine it on like a background of an inspirational travel photo or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. But let's work with what we've got. There's a quote from Bill Gates that he says, "We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10 years."
Oh, there you go. I did.
Yeah. So you got, yeah, like, I don't know. It's interesting how it works. But to me, people are probably overhyping this right now. But then
Mm.
we're also probably not even imagining really where this could go.
Yeah, I think the hype, that's related to the hype curve, right?
Yeah.
So over a 2-year span, we won't be at the peak of the hype, and then and then it declines, and then it kind of gets into a useful, like, all the kind of all this like con artists and snake oil salesmen like leave the industry. Like that's kind of what's happening with crypto right now, right? And then like the real use cases start getting built,
Mhm.
right? And I think AI is definitely the beginning of the hype cycle. Crypto is probably like shaking out a lot of the scammers, right? And now like the people still in crypto are probably like the real ones actually building something. But there's one thing that Bill Gates like probably didn't factor in there. Not that I'm smarter than Bill Gates, but, but I read other people that are as smart as him. The problem is the hype cycle is exponentially shortening,
Mhm.
right? So like it used to take 10 years. I think AI, the rate of innovation is exponential, right? So if you look at the number of papers per month that are published on AI, that the number of papers published is exponential.
Yeah.
Right. So you might be able to read 10 papers this month, or like 100 papers, whatever, but like pretty soon it's going to be thousands of papers and tens of thousands of papers, and it's kind of doubling every 2 years or something, right? So you'll very quickly get to the point where you can't actually keep up with the innovation, and I think we really underestimate just how fast like exponentials fly past you, right? So Tim Urban, Wait But Why, has an amazing post on this, and it's basically like kind of showing. I think he uses like an analogy of a lake being filled exponentially, and you're watching this lake, and the water level is just like here and here, and it's like down there for like a very long time, and then all of a sudden it goes, and then it's full, and I think like the problem is that we're kind of maybe at that point where it goes, like this stuff is really, really getting a lot better a lot faster. Like GPT-4, we don't know what's going to happen with that, but that's supposed to be out in the next few months. Like Bing or Sydney, whatever you want to call it.
I do prefer
that's
Sydney.
already like a huge leap ahead of ChatGPT. In some ways, it's to the point where like people are, not quite like falling in love with it, but I've seen people that have genuine emotional reactions to the things that Bing has said to them. It's kind of nuts. I've never really seen that before. So, you wouldn't have imagined that with ChatGPT.
Mm. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's an example of like a parasocial relationship. Like often people perceive that they have this strong emotion, like relationship or friendship with an influencer, for example, and the influencer doesn't maybe even know that they exist.
Yeah.
And we just have this ability to project emotions onto. And now we're coming to the era. Like there have been virtual influencers for a while, actually, but AI influencers and. Let's see where that goes. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Whatever happens.
Yeah. But for sure, it's that exponential movement where it seems like nothing's happening, and then all of a sudden something's happened, and you can really only recognize that in hindsight. But I ask put another piece of LinkedIn wisdom out there.
Sure.
This is a quote from Mel Robbins. I think originally like a TED Talk or something, and I'll give you one version of the quote. No one's coming. No one's coming to push you. No one's coming to tell you to turn the TV off. Nobody's coming to write the business plan for you. It's up to you. And the reason I quote that, like, because there's this idea that AI is coming or that AI is here and that it's coming to take your job. But I also feel like where we are right now, and this could change very fast, like we've just been saying with exponential movement.
Yeah.
But AI is like not coming to take your job right now. Actually, AI is kind of waiting or like for you. Like right now, we have to find the use cases. We have to tell AI what to do at the moment.
100%. Yeah, 100%. Actually, like this is one of my big theses or theses or whatever the correct phrasing of that is. I'll ask ChatGPT later. But like I think when you go into an office, right? They might not seem like it, but like everyone in that room is an intelligence, right? Like that is currently smarter than AI. And I think that a lot of what people expect, like the AI is just going to be self-aware and like take over all the jobs and be trading in the stock market, whatever. Maybe like in some kind of niche cases, and maybe eventually like it will kind of have its own economy in a way. But I think at least in the interim, it's a tool, right? It's a better tool than what we had before, but you have to use it. You have to decide. And I think that this is where it kind of brings me back to my book, but I'm writing about the topic of memetics, which is kind of breaking down what makes a successful marketing campaign, what makes a successful like movie or blog post, and kind of breaking it down to individual components, and then deciding like what to use, what to kind of remix into what you're creating. And I think that when ChatGPT and DALL-E are kind of because they're bringing down the cost of creation, like you can make a really good image, you can make some really good copy pretty quickly. The real bottleneck now is what do you create? So that's what I'm trying to do with marketing memetics. My book is I'm trying to get that's like the guide that you can give to someone to basically do the research and figure out like what components should I include, what components shouldn't I include, like what trends are happening, and therefore like what should I create? Because I think that right now that's like elusive and a big black box, especially to data people like me and like you, right? Like I don't know anything about art, right? Like I didn't study art. I'm not like a classically trained writer. So like the way that I do writing is I research, I do analysis, right? And the way that I create images on DALL-E or Midjourney is that I do research. So for example, you can go and you can see all the different art styles. There's a Google kind of culture hub. I can send you the link. And it shows you all the different like romanticism and like impressionism and and it kind of shows you like when they were popular and like what are the main artists. I kind of reached a limit on what I could create with DALL-E, and then I found that, and I'm like, okay, great. So I can go through and see those different art styles and then now I have a word for it, right? So I know the meme essentially, right? And I'm not limited to just say like make something like Starry Night or make something like the Mona Lisa, because I can go in and find like a specific cyberpunk or whatever. Maybe I didn't know that name before, and then I can include that in my prompt. So I think that because AI makes everything a lot easier to create, now the hard thing is going to be kind of like figuring out what to create and what to use these tools for.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's funny because people always thought that creativity would be the last thing that AI
Yeah.
would take from us, and in some ways, it ended up higher on the chopping block than we expected.
Mm.
ChatGPT is better at writing, which is considered more creative, than it is at math, which is
Yeah.
considered less creative or more rational or whatever, and it can just churn out image content in all varieties really fast. But there's still this other creative task, which is more like the creative impulse or the idea, the what to do, like you're saying.
Yeah.
So memes and memetics is
Yeah.
sort of your toolkit for that. And that's still that actually because AI doesn't have a creative impulse. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, it's like the symptoms versus the cause, and somehow it's able to express the symptoms of creativity or these indicators of creativity, but it didn't have any creative impulse. That still rests with us.
Yeah, it's not creating it for itself, right? It's creating it for you. So you have to do the prompt, right? And that's kind of where I've been getting into prompt engineering, and like I'm creating a course for O'Reilly Media that's coming out in May, like on their platform. So yeah, that's kind of the other side of it, is like kind of figuring out what you want to create and then communicating it effectively. And then it just becomes like working with humans, right? Like working with any intelligence, you have to communicate clearly and you have to tell them what you want, right? So I think like a lot of the same things we learn from management, I think we'll start applying to AI as well.
hmm And like let's just pick up prompt engineering for another minute here. Like,
Yeah,
um,
because you're a skeptic, right?
yeah, I am, but I mean, so prompt engineering. I mean, tell me maybe like just quickly give me a definition, and it's just my feeling is like at first it was probably harder to Google things. Like the algorithm was a bit harder to steer
Mm,
in the direction that you wanted, and
yeah,
people were less skilled doing so. And they over time though, the technology improved. It got better at understanding the meaning of our queries and stuff like that,
mhm,
um, and also people got better at Googling. And then over time, Google started just you know predicting and suggesting queries for you.
mm,
And I'm wondering if we wouldn't follow a similar trajectory with prompts, where right now it feels a bit unnatural to us. We're not that skilled at it, where
yeah,
the technology needs some hand holding, but then over time, this will work itself out. So I wonder if it's a window of opportunity, or
yeah.
how do you see it?
Cool. So yeah, let's. So definition of prompt engineering is essentially just like the prompt is what you feed the AI when you ask it to do something, right? So for GPT, it would be like, I don't know, write me a blog post on this topic, right? And then it auto completes like what it thinks comes next, right? And then for Dali or any of the image gen stuff, it would be like, give me a photo of I don't know, an astronaut riding a horse, right? Now, the prompt engineering right now is kind of is hacky, right? And like I'm always a hacky guy, right? Like my first agency was started as a growth hacking agency, and then eventually we rebranded to like growth marketing when that kind of became too spammy. But usually when there's new technology out, there are usually a couple of like small like tips and tricks that can make a outsized difference when you know them, right? And prompt engineering is currently at that phase where like just adding one like magic word, like I don't know, the classic one is trending on ArtStation, right? So
Okay.
like Stable Diffusion obviously trained on ArtStation, and it knows that like it has the trending on ArtStation tag, then that's like a really good photo. So or a really good picture. So if you just say like a photo of an astronaut, riding a horse, like trending on ArtStation, you're going to get a much better quality photo.
Mhm.
Right? So there are tricks like that. I think that is going away eventually, right? You're right that actually, like even in the past couple of months, you're getting much better quality with less instruction. I think that's true, but I also think that even if the hacky kind of element goes away, it's still going to be really important to communicate effectively, right? And actually, I think Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, he says kind of the same thing, like prompt engineering of like adding one magic word to the prompt and everything changes is probably going to go away as the models get better. But what will always be important is the quality of your ideas.
Yeah.
So that's why, like when I'm teaching prompt engineering, what I'm kind of teaching are like not the hacks necessarily, although I do practice a lot of them right now in the short term to get the results I need, but more like the kind of perennial things, the evergreen ideas that will always be important, right? So, I again, I always kind of bring this back to my time managing an agency. Like what was useful with human intelligence is also useful with artificial intelligence, right? Like providing a couple of examples in the prompt will get you like much better quality output, like much more deterministic output, like less random stuff when you feed that to the AI. Giving direction, like art direction, or direction in terms of like what you want back in the copy, will give you more unique results, more interesting results, right? And kind of steer in the right direction. Chaining different tasks together rather than giving one big task also gets really good results, right? Basically, like if you just go to one person and say, I don't know, build me a marketing agency, right? Like there are very few people who could do that. They can encapsulate the full thing in their head, right? But if you go and say like, write a blog post given this title, right, or like write an outline for a blog post given this title, and then ping each kind of part of the outline and say like write this section, write this section, write this section, and then you send kind of another task. You say, okay, when you have the completed sections, you go like rewrite this in to sound more human, right? And you kind of do that for each section, and then you go through and go, are there any factual errors in this, right? And then you can even have like a lookup and you call like a database and pull that into the prompt. So when you break it down into multiple small tasks, then you get much better results. That's true of humans and of AIs, right? Yeah. Like that the kind of specialization thing, like that just always works, no matter who the intelligence is. So that's what I try and focus on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it reminds me earlier, like the word management came up, and yeah, I think it's about communications, having clear instructions, clear direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I want to bring this around to like let's call it, I don't know, the war of the search engines. I think I've heard this term.
Yeah.
But
because now making Google dance. Yeah, I love that
dance, monkey dance.
Yeah, that was real energy right there. Like he said, I want people to know that we made Google dance.
Yeah.
That's pretty nice.
That was a bonkers interview. Yeah. I saw some meme about it was basically like an old photo of Jeff Bezos when he was really nerdy looking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then like showing him like now kind of buff and power bald. And then there was a similar one for the Microsoft CEO. And it's like he's becoming Bezos. And
I mean, what a CEO! Like success after success. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, and he's rehabilitated in many ways the brand, or I mean, like
Microsoft's cool again.
Yeah, it's the little monopoly that could.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show if you lose out on one monopoly, you can always get one again in the future, as long as you survive long enough.
Yeah, I know. Like one day, like right now, we're like, it's so cool that they've got OpenAI, and they're making Google dance. And then one day we'll be like, how did we let them get OpenAI?
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, what's your take on like this Bing versus Bard versus U.com? These other total kind of really more startup energy kind of things. What's your take on the current landscape?
Yeah, so I mean, I think Google has had like the best business model in history, right? Just prints money. I mean, the reason they invest in so many random businesses and give so much away for free is just because essentially they don't want to like show how much profit search makes. Right? It's like obscene how much money that company makes because it's brilliant. You know, it's fundamentally like the best type of business you could possibly run. So it's a really, really big deal to even like make them take notice of your company, right? So I think OpenAI have done an amazing job to do that. I think that Microsoft again have been very clever to put the muscle behind that, kind of be the because Google could crush OpenAI on its own, but it's a much fairer fight with Microsoft's 10 billion backing it, right? It's still a fight, right? Like they still have a huge uphill battle to fight, right? Like Google has enormous advantages, but they also have a major disadvantage, which is what I think everyone missed, which is culture. Because it's been so profitable for so long, and because all of their advantages are predicated on search being an information retrieval thing, right? So I type in what I want, and then you scour the whole web and send me back, as quickly as possible, what I've requested. And so Google is always about speed. Like every investment they've made, every moat that they've dug is like they laid undersea cables just for themselves so that they could have faster responses on search than anyone else, right? Like things like that. And it's weird, and this is always the way it works, I guess, with disruptive innovation. Like their competition is much slower, right? Like talking to ChatGPT, talking to Bing is way slower than a Google search, and so they've kind of nullified the advantages. It's also like way less accurate. Like Google prides themselves that have had tens of thousands of people working on accuracy of results, and here's this competitor that is like making stuff up, right? And it's also like a lot less profitable, right? It's very expensive to run inference for one of these AIs. So one of the estimates was I think Google pays like I don't know, it's like 2.5 cents per search, right? It's going to be like maybe more like 25 cents per search for Bing. And that cost will obviously come down. But those are three reasons why I think it's going to be hard for Google. They're going to have to really pull off like a big culture shift, because their whole culture has been built around like, how do we get faster results? How do we get more accurate results? And then how do we bring down the cost of providing those results? And this new disruptive technology is worse on all three of those dimensions. So it's worse on all of the things that Google has cared about for 20 years. And I think that's why it's going to be very hard for them. If they introduce Bard into the search results, they're going to have to suffer from like giving worse results, right? Inaccurate results, right? Their cogs are going to go up 10x, right? And it's going to be really hard, I think, for them to do that. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, you can't count Google out, but like we saw Facebook, Meta rebrand and like start spending 10 billion a year on the metaverse to try and avoid a similar fate, right? Like they see like the metaverse is the thing that will disrupt their current kind of standing, and he had to pull back because shareholders hated it. They didn't want all the increased costs. They didn't want them to they wanted the profit margins that came from being dominant on the things they're currently dominant in. So I think it'd be really hard for Google to shift, and that's where I think the opportunity is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really fascinating because like the margin that you said, like or the cost of search, and then the cost of goods sold there, like in their traffic acquisition costs and so on. These things, it's just a pain point because there was never really an official number that came out of this, but the topic came up during this here in Europe, this CSS program, where we found out I mean, of course, Google collects a margin on all their clicks and so on,
Yeah.
but this margin was not allowed to be charged to the CSSs, and so this
Mm,
number came down that you get like a 20% discount on your clicks that you purchase through a CSS, a
right.
comparison shopping service, and that result isn't visible in that way anyhow. But let's assume they have a 20% margin. Then what's going to happen to that margin, or what will they need to do in order to make this work? Especially because, like, they're not going to use full strength Lambda, I guess, but they need to find a balance here where they're delivering technology that is meaningfully more powerful or better than what GPT-3 or
Mm.
GPT-3.5 can do, and yet also not blowing up the cost too much. And
Yeah.
uh,
I think they do have a technological advantage still. Like, they invented the transformer, right?
yeah,
Like, all of the things that OpenAI used, to, like, a lot of the breakthroughs they used to build their technology came from Google first. In fact, they've basically been poaching Google staff for a while.
mm,
So I think Google still has that advantage. If anyone can bring the cost down, it's them, right? Like, I think Microsoft has obviously done a really good job, and they have Azure, but like, you wouldn't bet against Google in terms of infrastructure. I think. I think the other thing they can potentially do. Microsoft has never ever had to solve an accuracy problem, really, right? Like, like, a lot of their products are B2B, where, like, the company just tells you who's their employee. Like, you don't. I mean, yeah, I'm sure there are, like, verification things they've needed to do for Xbox and stuff, right? But like, Google has had to, for its whole existence, like, figure out which web pages to rank, based on the accuracy of the content, right? So I think Google's main, kind of bull case here is that if they figure out accuracy quicker, then you just wouldn't use Bing, right? Like, there's no way, and I think that's also an advantage in terms of, like, in the sale of advantage, like, whoever gets the most accurate kind of one is going to win, because the hallucination is currently, like, really the only thing stopping this being in production, like, across the world, right? And that's the thing that Google are worried about. That said, just like in self-driving cars, I think Tesla are beating Google, right? Like, Waymo is in an embarrassingly small number of locations, right? And it only works in those locations. Whereas, like, Tesla have, thousands of cars on the road that are full self-driving, right?
yeah,
And yeah, I know it's not like, you couldn't, like, go to sleep and let your Tesla drive itself, but, like,
not supposed
Tesla
to.
actually, yeah, they were, like, less risk averse than Google, and therefore they're winning the
Mm,
self driving car race, because they just got the cars on the road and they started collecting data, and they started to see how people interact with them. I think that's where OpenAI has been very smart. So they
yeah,
just got it out there, and consequences be damned, right? Like, let's figure
mm,
this out. And I
yeah.
think that kind of freewheeling approach is really, it's dangerous. There's some element of risk. Like, they could blow up the whole company, and it could cause political backlash potentially. But it's also, like, the best way to get training data.
Mm. Yeah, I think risk aversion has been key here so far. It's why Google hasn't moved faster, and you see why. Like, they had that single snafu with the James Webb Telescope and
Mm.
this factoid when they were kind of showcasing Bard,
Yeah.
and it cut off like 100 billion market cap for them.
Yeah.
And so like, their worst nightmare came true. They're like, but what if it's inaccurate and this has brand splashbacks on it? And that's what happened. And yeah, OpenAI has been able to move fast and break things, as Facebook's motto was once upon a time.
Yeah.
But then as soon as 10 billion funding from Microsoft has been injected, um, it's a question, like, you can tell that the company was feeling really amped, really bold at the
Mm.
start, but the question is, can they sustain that? Can they commit to that? Um,
Yeah.
or does the risk start to mount for them too?
Yeah.
Because right now there's this feeling or impression that they have nothing to lose, but once they've started spending that 10 billion, they start to have something to lose, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and I think the other bullish case for Google is just how, like, I'm not going to say the terms are bad because like I've never raised $10 billion, but like if you are sitting on the edge of building like the world's best AI, and like the promises that this will change the way we work across the whole world, right? Would you sell like 49% of your company for $10 billion? Right, like Stripe is worth 50 or plus, right? So like just a payments processor, obviously a very good one, but like that's worth 50. Would you say that like your like game-changing AI that's going to upend entire industries is only worth like 20? Like I mean, to me, like the terms of that deal with Microsoft told me that like there's either like something really big that they're worried about that Microsoft can help them with, like maybe it's just the GPU costs or access to GPUs, or maybe it's really that like it's we're going to reach a plateau at some point. I'm not sure, but like it struck me as like very odd that like they would give away that much of the company for 10 billion. 10 billion is a lot, but like I ask WeWork's investors, right? It was like a strange off note.
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I don't know how I would react with a 10 billion paycheck or like check.
But this is like Sam Altman as well. Like he's accustomed to big numbers, right? Like he was running YC before, so like he's probably like the single best placed person in the world. Like if you're ever gonna like raise funding for a startup, you would want like Sam Altman to be running that process for you, right? And if those are the terms he could get, like much worse. Obviously, the economy is different, but like much worse than say the terms that the WeWork founder got when he didn't even really have a tech business. Like that makes me think like maybe like we're about to come out of the hype cycle, and they're kind of like, okay, we've got a long slog, or like there's like a really big problem, or like they're worried they're going to get sued for copyright infringement or something, right? Like there's definitely something that like we haven't figured out that's like leading to some hesitation on the valuation.
Yeah, good point. I mean, maybe let's I mean, we could keep talking about this, but let's bring that around. I've got one more question for you to keep us in time box here.
Sure.
So, like, I guess you can interpret this in different ways. Let's see how you run with it. But
Yeah.
because there's a lot we don't know about generative AI and AI right now. So, how wrong do you think that we're getting generative AI right now? How big do you think is the space for what Donald Rumsfeld would call unknown unknowns?
Yeah, that's tough. That's a really tough question. I mean, what's been really interesting about Bing is that most people are actually like disappointed when it starts switching over to like searching. And actually, like a lot of the prompt hacking kind of guys that I follow on Twitter, they're they're like actively trying to jailbreak Sydney, and they can treat Sydney separate from Bing, right? And you can really see it in the transcripts. Like seems really different. And the weird thing is that like I think Ben Thompson had a really good post on this on Stratechery recently, but he was like, I don't want like to do Bing search and find actual results. Like I want to talk to Sydney. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like almost like an emotional kind of attachment. It's like really interesting. I want to talk to this like other intelligence. And I think that that's the part that was like surprising about this, is that like nobody expected it to be able to create art, right? But like nobody expected to be able to have like a real like emotional attachment like this early to talking to a robot, right? So I think like what we don't know is like what like is like just how deep that will go, and I think that maybe this is where like Meta has like an interesting like outside play, because they like most people don't really think about it, but like they are probably one of the few companies in the world that has deployed AI at larger scale than Microsoft, right? Because the whole timeline is run by AI. So like I would say like Google's infrastructure is like seems like better, but in general, like Meta is like a very strong AI team, and like have some pretty leading people. They've experimented in this space as well, but they have like the training data that nobody else has, which is people talking. So I think like what's unknown is like if AI really does become about like I want to just chat to this thing, and I use it like as a friend, a companion, or like a smart person to like kind of give me advice, which is basically kind of how I'm using ChatGPT. Then I think it changes the whole game and like maybe really changes like what we're going to use it for. Maybe accuracy becomes less important because like people aren't accurate. Like when we're talking to each other, and I bet you I've made some inaccurate statements, right? And I'm sure that you have as well. And like we care less about accuracy when it's about relationships. So I think that that's what's not known. I think is like where the demand from the market will be. Like you saw actually like GPT-3 has been around for a long time. Like like I've been using it for years, and it's still the same underlying model that's powering ChatGPT, but because it's a chatbot, like people are engaging with it more emotionally and they're kind of using it a lot more, and it's becoming more mainstream. So I think like that's the part that if like we get into like these weird kind of this rabbit hole of emotional connection with AI, I have no idea where that's going to go, and it's going to really change like who's going to win that battle, because Google is not like an emotion-driven company, right? So they might be completely out of that game. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, good thoughts, and I think emotion is a wild card here because it's the stupidest thing, and maybe it's something to do with my upbringing, or I don't know, but I still find myself sometimes typing the word please or fighting not to type the word please.
Yeah, and I say thank you to ChatGPT after it's done a good job. Like it. But like I'm betting that the transcripts will be saved somewhere in the cloud, and like when AI does take over, if it looks it up and says that Mike's always been nice,
you get some karma points.
Then maybe it'll spare me. I don't know.
Exactly, during the robot singularity.
Yeah.
Well, cool. It's been really great chatting with you again, Mike. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah.
Where can we find you online, and anything? Of course, your book, Marketing Memetics. What are you up to? Where can we find you online?
Yeah. So Marketing Memetics is the main thing I'm focused on right now. So if you go to that website, it's got more information. And that should hopefully be out in the next couple of months, just kind of in the editing process. So that's been fun, and you'll probably see me like on more podcasts and stuff at some point, but once I get around to it. But yeah, that's a good place to go. And then I think like I'm mostly like on Twitter, like pretty much every day. I'm hammer_mt. On Twitter, so you can feed my addiction further and follow me there.
Cool. Yeah, we'll definitely throw you some likes and increase the dopamine loop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Then thanks again, Mike.
Cool. All right. Yeah, good to talk.
Thanks for listening to Growing Ecommerce. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider sharing it with coworkers, friends, or within your professional network. We really appreciate it. This podcast is produced by Smarter Ecommerce, also known as SMEC. To learn more, visit smarter-ecommerce.com.